Hello, friends, and welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies, a podcast that's listening to the songs of Disney movies, past and present. I'm Josh Spiegel.
And I'm Scott Renshaw. Thanks for joining us on this comprehensive and encyclopedic compendium of all things Disney music. Now playing from 2017, Coco.
Before we get into our discussion, thank you for listening. No matter how you're checking us out, we hope you like what you're hearing. And if you are, we'd appreciate it if you could rate and review Mousterpiece Melodies on iTunes, Spotify, or whatever app you're using to listen.
That's right. Let everyone know how much you love the show and tell your friends to do the same. You can follow me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw and read my film criticism at cityweekly.net.
And you can follow me on Blue Sky at Mousterpiece, where we're finally in round 2 of the Ultimate Walt Disney Animation Studios songs bracket. The songs in this movie don't count, but that's okay. You can still follow me there and vote every day. And email me at masterpiececinema@gmail.com with any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share. All right, now that all the housekeeping is out of the way, let's start talking about the songs of Coco. And to do that, we are thrilled to bring into the show a very special guest. She is a freelance entertainment journalist and author, Kristen Lopez. Welcome to Mousterpiece Melodies. Thanks for being here.
Hello. I'm sorry to disappoint anybody that thought you got Kristen Anderson Lopez.
You know, I was honestly thinking to myself beforehand, do I make that joke or is that really like, should I not do it? And I thought, if she says it, that's good. But you've also had you've had at least a decade of having that problem. Obviously, Kristen Anderson Lopez has been doing work before this too.
No, it's funny. We've actually become friendly, her and I, through our shared names. So great. I mean, I could throw the story out. I remember being in college, and I gave a student my email, or a classmate my email address for a group project, and she came back on Monday, and I'm like, I never heard from you. And she's like, yeah, so I spelled your email wrong. And I got this email back from the woman that wrote the songs for Frozen. Oh my God. And eventually, this kind of kept happening throughout, is like I got approached by a prominent celebrity who thought that I was her and wanted me to write like a song, and I had to really disappoint him and be like, not her. And so eventually we met, her and I was like, I'm the other Kristen Lopez. Turns out I figured out why my email is literally like one digit different than her email address. So on occasions we'll just swap emails, be like, well, this came for you. It's been a funny little thing that we know each other now because people confuse us.
That is wild. And also, I love how you snuck in a fascinating little blind item there. What famous actor must have emailed you thinking you were her?
Well, I mean, maybe not a cult TV act. I'll tell you off air.
Okay.
It also sounds like the film writer Sean Levy always doing these. I am not the filmmaker Sean Levy.
Yes,
that's a good one. Yes. Well, that aside, we are even if you are not the Academy Award winning songwriter of the song from this movie. There you go. We are thrilled, though, to have you with us to talk about the songs of Coco, the 2017 film from Pixar Animation Studios, featuring the voices of Anthony Gonzalez, Benjamin Bratt, Gael Garcia Bernal, and many more. This is a film directed by Lee Unkrich, co-directed by Adrian Molina, all about the land of the dead, about a little boy who wants to be a big boy, a big musical boy. Miguel, he lives in Mexico with his family, and he desperately wants to be a musician. His whole family hates music. And one day, for reasons, he winds up in the land of the dead during Dia de los Muertos and wants badly to get home, but he also wants the chance to meet his musical idol in the process. Now, before we do our discussion, our track-by-track discussion of the 6 original songs in this film, one of which is not only an Academy Award winner, but one of which appears quite a few times in this movie for reasons that anybody knows if they've seen this film. Let's cast our minds back to almost 9 years ago when this movie was released. What a different time it was. Donald Trump was president. That would be crazy if that was true now. Anyway, let's all cast our minds back. What was your initial experience with Coco back in November of 2017? Kristen, then Scott, then I'll go.
Yeah, I remember seeing this in a theater because I saw everything big, major releases, and I'm a huge Pixar fan. So I was really, really excited for this. I think I had just finished up, kind of this like year-long blogging thing that I had decided to do, reviewing every Disney animated feature. And I remember thinking this was so different. It had a different look. It clearly had a different personality. It was, it actually had like an, Latino bent to it. I remember that being a really big thing. I got asked to write more than one article because my last name is Lopez about like the fact that this is Latino, and Disney's allowing, brown people to make, to be lead characters in their movies. And I just remember it being really vibrant and having a fun time with it. I loved it when it came, and it's one of those movies that's now become part of my Halloween / Dia de los Muertos, like, necessary viewing.
Well, so this is, at least according to my logging, my third full viewing. And my recollection from the first couple times was, I like this movie. I like it visually, but I feel like I'm missing something culturally that would snap that has some people just finding it emotionally devastating. I just, the moment when everyone else is weeping, it's like, I'm not there. I don't know what it is. It's like, I dig what this movie's doing. I like that it's fine that not every movie is for me. I had that reaction at the time. It's like, maybe there's something here that is just, latches onto something specific to the cultural context, and it's not for me, and that's okay. But I think something else did snap into place this time that I am going to be interested to touch on later. That I had a much stronger reaction to it this time than in any of my previous viewings.
I would throw out, for me, I think I went back and looked at what Disney and Pixar had put out prior to this. And for me, this was kind of after a string of being whelmed by a lot of things. So, I liked Inside Out. Inside Out is the one that I would say, Scott, like, has grown on me over, like, I didn't connect with it when it first came out, and now it's kind of grown. But then The Good Dinosaur came out, Zootopia, which again is another movie that I'm like, it was fine. Finding Dory, Moana, Cars 3, which is like the nadir of kind of the animated movies at that time. So I think when I saw Coco, I was like, finally a Disney movie that I've liked after kind of several months of there being so much content and just not connecting with it.
First of all, I just want to point out that in my notes, because I rewatched the film yesterday, I have, at the specific scene that Scott is talking about, you would have to be made of stone to not get emotional at this scene. So apparently, back in 2017, Scott, you are telling me you were made of stone. And by the way, you know what I think is fascinating? We must have talked about it on the podcast, on the old show. Yes. I have no recollection of having even a remotely spirited debate with you, although I must have, because, like you, straight white guy, very little cultural connection for me with this when I saw it. I definitely remember getting very emotional at that specific scene at the time. And I don't think I have the same level of emotional devastation, we'll say, at this as I do when I rewatch Toy Story 2 with the When She Loved Me sequence or something along those lines. But it's still a very emotional scene. It's funny, though, because, Scott, it sounds like, I think what you are implying is that you might like this movie more now than you did originally.
That is correct.
And I, apparently, have had a slightly reverse reaction. I still like this movie a lot. I think I was reminding myself, not only the timing is so fascinating, I was just reminding myself that this movie came out in theaters November 22nd, literally a day after The Hollywood Reporter published the story about John Lasseter and the allegations of sexual abuse that eventually led to him leaving the studio, which I mentioned because, I remember that at the time this movie's release was unfortunately somewhat a little bit initially overshadowed by the fact that somebody who had been such a major part of Disney, for good or ill, for such a long time was leaving as part of a fallout at the broader Me Too situation. And now, he's over at Skydance, which is overseen by Paramount, which is run by a bunch of super cool people. And anyway, now I'm rewatching it 2 days after a big story about how Pixar is going through this devastating series of layoffs, part of a larger set of Walt Disney Company ones. And it's just thinking about the fact, speaking of Toy Story, this is a month after, we're recording this episode on July 23rd, 5 weeks after Toy Story 5 comes out, makes presumably at least $1 billion, a movie that I'm sure I'll get around to seeing at some point. If you had told me Toy Story 4 version of me, 2019, if we had done this, oh, by the way, you're not going to see the fifth one in theaters, probably. I would have been amazed, but that's the truth. Coco in 2017, I did see it a press screening. I really liked it a lot. I will say that looking back, even at just previous Pixar films, I was definitely a huge fan of Inside Out in 2015. The Good Dinosaur is definitely a movie that I saw and don't plan on seeing ever again. Finding Dory, Cars 3, not great either. But what I found especially fascinating, and the reason I mentioned the layoff situation that we've been seeing unfold at Pixar in the last couple of days, is that while there is, understandably, a perception of sequelitis continuing to overtake Pixar, they did have a pretty lengthy stretch in this decade of only releasing original or original adjacent films. Onward, Soul, Luca, Turning Red, Lightyear, Elemental. That is 6 straight movies that are not direct sequels to anything. Yes, Lightyear is connected to Toy Story. We all know it's not about the toy. It's about the human that the toy is based on. But they did a lot of original films, many of which were sent to streaming. I've already grasped about that on Blue Sky because there was I think the Variety story was like, executives think that might have inadvertently trained people to stop going to see Pixar movies in theaters. And it's like, yeah, who did that? Who did that? Yeah. Remind me who did that? Because it wasn't people. Coco, though, does, and so in that respect, Coco still kind of feels like the last great or even really good original Pixar film theatrically released specifically. That's the qualifier because, frankly, I think Turning Red is amazing. I like Luca a lot. Hoppers was fun. I think Coco, 9 years later, I think what I most was struck by this time, and both of you can correct me if I'm wrong about my recollection of the marketing of this movie going into it, but a big part of the marketing that I remember was Pixar's finally doing it. They're finally making a musical. They're finally making a movie with lots of songs in it. Does that feel like an accurate representation from what you remember of the marketing of this movie? I want to clarify that before I say what I want to say next.
I don't, because Frozen was Walt Disney Animation, right? So that
Correct. Not a Pixar film.
So I don't recall it being exclusively sold as like Pixar now is doing a musical. I remember it being sold as like Pixar is doing a Day of the Dead, like. It's not a Lily White, type of movie. Like, I really cannot, maybe because I was just covering it from that angle so much, but right. I remembered it being marketed as like, look at this colorful land, like it's based on a real holiday, it's set in Mexico. Like, I remember, and I think that was what's I think really striking about remembering it like that today in the world that we're living in right now is that, this was Trump 1.0 when it came out. And, we were still starting to see that kind of push, but it wasn't as egregious. And it made me think when I was revisiting the movie, if we would sell it like that today, or if we would just do it like it's just a musical. Like now I think Disney very much shies away from, and we've seen them make kind of those asinine comments about like, nobody wants personal movies anymore. And, your trauma is no longer going to be used in animation. Right. I think I don't think they would sell it like that anymore if it came out today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall specifically whether the music was part. I mean, I am someone who does not tend to or try to watch trailers. So there's that. I don't remember what the theatrical trailer is. What I just remember a lot is the way that they almost always sell these things, which is whatever goofy character we can put in the advertising that's, prominent. And it's like, so Dante was all over this thing.
Sure. Yes.
Dante was all over what I remember from commercials. And it's like, oh, it's a movie about a dog? I don't know. Okay.
Well, And so here's the reason why I asked, because this time, with my potentially faulty recollection in mind, I was thinking to myself, yes, there are 6 original songs in this film, but this is not really a musical. This is still Pixar kind of having its cake and eating it too, by which I mean, as I'm sure many of our listeners know, as the two of you probably know, when Pixar started making original films like Toy Story, they very specifically did not want to make movies like The Little Mermaid, or the film that Scott and I talked about in our previous episode, Beauty and the Beast. They didn't want to make Broadway-style musicals. And this is, again, very much not that either. It honestly made me think, and Scott, you may or may not have thought this yourself, it kind of made me think of something we always do near the ends of our episodes here, which is our own Coco, our cover corner. Because, yes, there are 6 original songs in this film, but really there's one very important song that we hear before the end credits are over in no fewer than 4 different contexts from 4 different sets of performers. And to this movie's credit, to the credit of Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez, who wrote that song, and notably, only that song. I'd forgotten they didn't write the other songs in this movie. That song sounds completely different every time you hear it. And I had forgotten about that. I'd forgotten, for example, that the first time we hear it, it sounds very different. And frankly, I think intentionally not great. It sounds okay, but not particularly good. And certainly it doesn't. And if like the first time around, I don't think I would have expected to myself, well, obviously that song is going to be deployed in an emotionally devastating fashion before the end of this movie. That song that ended with a guy getting killed by a bell. That's how it's going to sound at the end of it. Like, I think it's to this movie's credit. It's definitely to the credit of Robert Lopez and Kristen Anderson Lopez that it sounds so drastically different every time. But it was just like, I guess I put it this way. It's weirdly fitting that the first Pixar movie that leans so much on music in some capacity is about a kid whose family hates music. And they reminded me of Michael Palin in that specific role in Monty Python and the Holy Grail, with Prince Herbert, where every time the prince is about to sing, he busts and is like, no singing. It sounded very much like that to me. I like this movie though. Go ahead, Kristen.
I was going to say, I mean, and it's also worth contextualizing, like, the Lopez's had really kind of had a hell of a time with Frozen. You know, like those songs became so big. I mean, Let It Go became its own movement to the point where I think now people are just fairly sick of Let It Go. And I think I remember this kind of, at least in the Oscar circles, kind of making people wonder, like, were they one-trick ponies? Were they going to become the new kind of, Ashman, Menken Rice, band of Disney composers? So I remember it being a big deal when the Oscars were happening. Which is so funny. I'll throw out another great funny story. When I moved to LA, I went to an event, and one of the first people I ran into completely by accident was Diane Warren. And she asked what my name was, and I said Kristen Lopez, and she was like, I remember some bitch named Kristen Lopez getting my Oscar. She said it in jest. It was meant to be humorous. It was not like it was not meant to be rude. And I thought that was really funny, that's how it was. But I remember that being kind of the big deal. And I've interviewed both of them at this point, and they've kind of, we've talked about how they kind of have like a Betty Comden, Alfred Green type of old school Hollywood, kind of repertoire and how they work. And I think to watch Coco and to hear Remember Me and be like, these are the same people that gave us Let It Go and like Down the Witch's Road from, the Agatha series. Like, right. I think that it's fascinating that they're not working as fervently as like Ashman was. Like, they don't seem as integral to the Disney animated canon as Ashman was. And that seems really odd because they've had so much success with the studio.
Well, it seems to me even odder because, as a person who's also immersed in theater, I also knew Avenue Q and the Book of Mormon before. And so it feels like this is the new Disney group. Wow. I mean, even for musical theater, that's some out there stuff. So it's, was definitely not expecting that they would turn into the, well, I guess the closest version of the house composers, except for maybe Miranda. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and it is interesting because as we're talking about this, reminded myself that the last movie that the Lopez's worked on was Frozen 2. And, one day we'll talk about Frozen 2 on this show. We haven't yet. Some of the songs in that movie are good. I remember my eventual spoiler is I think that is a movie that emotionally works for me, even though logically it makes no goddamn sense. But getting back to this. So we are going to talk about each of the versions of Remember Me. So the track by track discussion here. The movie begins with Miguel, voiced by Anthony Gonzalez. And I just want to point out, I'd forgotten, since I hadn't seen the movie in so long, Anthony Gonzalez is really great in this movie. Mm-hmm. He deservedly won the Annie Award for voice acting. It is such a challenging amount of work that a kid has to do because you have to believe by the emotionally devastating end that this kid really feels it. He is so exuberant. Like, I hadn't seen this movie in so long, but the one thing that always stuck with me from the intro is dimple, no dimple, dimple, no dimple, dimple. Like that little bit, it just always it's a great performance. He sets up the stage for the movie. It's set in the Mexican town of Santa Cecilia. Miguel is, again, he loves music, but everybody else in his family loathes it because his great-great-grandmother, Imelda, Mama Imelda, was married to a man whose identity we don't know for a while, even though this time around especially I was thinking, it's actually pretty obvious if you think about it for more than a second who the mystery man is and who the mystery man isn't. The man who we don't know his name yet, he leaves her and her daughter, Coco, to pursue music. And because he never returns, Imelda bans music from their entire family. They become shoemakers. Miguel loves music. He idolizes the late musical performer and actor Ernesto de la Cruz, voiced by Benjamin Bratt. And he has taught himself how to play guitar by watching these old movies. And again, there's a lot of tension between him and his family because of how much he loves Ernesto de la Cruz and his signature song, which we see a brief clip of before he is killed by that aforementioned bell, Remember Me. This is, I think, again, when you think about the movie as a whole, this is deliberately meant to be the weakest version of the song. It sounds drastically different from the other three on purpose. It's technically a ballad even when Benjamin Bratt performs it, which he does perform that specific song. There's another actor, Antonio Sol, provides his singing voice except for that song. It's fine, but as I mentioned before, you really don't understand the weight it's going to take on until much later. What do the two of you think about this initial version of Remember Me?
I think, like you said, it's deliberately meant to be mid. There's no real emotion in it, even though it's supposed to be in this big ballad moment between him and the girl that he's wooing in this movie. It kind of sounds like, if anybody's seen like Elvis movies, Elvis, you always had like kind of these, ballad-esque type of love songs where it didn't really, the goal is to just kind of like get the girl to kiss you. And it's funny that most of those songs aren't as best remembered as something compared to the more like plaintive, like can't help falling in love or something like that. So that's how I kind of see it, is like somebody clearly watched a lot of like Elvis musicals and was like, how can we just write a really basic, like this song is going to make us millions of dollars, but it has no soul.
I'm sorry, I've fallen in love with the term deliberately mid. I might actually start. I might start using that in my like social media bios or something because. But I do think that is really a great description because we're supposed to get a sense, and again, we only really understand this in hindsight, having heard the other versions, that this is someone who didn't understand the song, who stripped all of the emotion and the soul and the meaning out of it and just turned it into a pop hit of sorts. And so I think it's a great way to introduce the song, to go, this was his big song, and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, it's something that's it's catchy, okay, but whatever. And it's a really smart way to introduce the song that is going to have such a significance throughout.
Yeah. And again, at the beginning, Miguel would think it's insane that anybody would speak even moderately ill of Ernesto de la Cruz. He's this amazing performer. And during one of there's a bit of an argument between Miguel and the rest of his family. He inadvertently bumps over their ofrenda, where they will be putting pictures of the family members they've lost. The idea being that the spirits of those family members will return during De los Muertos. And when he does so, he realizes that there's a part of the photograph with Mama Imelda and Mama Coco that has every part of his great-great-grandfather except, of course, his head. And because this mystery figure is holding a guitar that sure looks like the same one Ernesto de la Cruz is holding and uses in his shows, he believes that means that none other than Ernesto de la Cruz is his great-great-grandfather. He tells the whole family they don't care. They only think that proves further that this guy was a piece of crap and that music is no fun. It's no good.
They just want to make shoes, damn it.
Exactly. And so his grandmother, Elena, destroys the guitar, pulls a Pete Townsend, destroys the guitar, and he decides he's going to shun the family. Around this same time, we do hear the second original song in the film. And I do want to note that outside of Remember Me, in all of its forms, the other songs were written by co-director Adrian Molina and the film's composer, Jermaine Franco, including Much Needed Advice, which is another song that we hear Ernesto de la Cruz sing in one of those clips. It's fine. It sounds very much to somebody who does not know enough about this culture. To me, it sounds like it would fit into films of that era, but it also kind of raises the question of, wow, this guy was meant to be that popular. He's fine, I guess. But what did the two of you think of Much Needed Advice?
It's a song I always forget is there.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, it's there to kind of situate that, yeah, he's a popular singing star. Again, Mexican Elvis, kind of.
Yes.
And I think that I give, Brat credit, and the performer who sings his songs, whose name I have forgotten, the fact that the character is supposed to be this kind of Latin lover, so to speak, hero, he's all of these things, and yet musically, he's, again, giving you the equivalent of empty calories, it's just kind of there to move records, and you get where somebody like Miguel would be charmed by that, even if once, you wonder what Miguel would have thought when he turns 15, 25, would he feel the same way about this guy?
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is one of the things that, you talked about whether or not it was sold as a musical, and maybe this is why I actually am now starting to think it was, because I'm realizing part of what you were saying about how many of the songs are interrupted in one manner or another. We don't hear very much. It's these little snippets, and I'm like, can I hear the whole song and draw some conclusions about whether these things are good? And so I think this is part of the frustration I have with some of the non-Remember Me songs is, even as we'll get into some of the later ones, even if we hear more of them, the structuring of the sequences breaks the songs up. They're not designed to be the center of the scene. They are often the background of the scene. We're not really getting the focus on the songs themselves, and it doesn't really allow them to land. So it's like, yeah, that's Kristen. Good. I'm just saying it's your point that this is like, I forget it's there. It's the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, there's this 40-second snippet of something in a movie that he's watching, and that's about it.
I do wonder if it's a narrative choice, though, at least before he gets to the Land of the Dead, that the town, his family doesn't love singing, so that every time he tries to indulge in it, it's truncated because the universe is kind of working against him.
Yeah, and while I completely understand that from a narrative standpoint, it still means that the songs themselves don't really register.
Sure.
So, and again, I think it definitely applies to the songs before we get to the Land of the Dead, because of the family basically cutting in every time. So after Miguel has this big row with the family, he breaks into the mausoleum in the town, which is where Ernesto de la Cruz's body is laid to rest. He takes the guitar because he wants to perform in a local talent competition that night. But as soon as Miguel begins to play the guitar, even to practice it, he becomes invisible to everybody who is alive, and inexplicably, at the moment at least, he can interact with the dead. So he goes to the land of the dead to figure out what is going on. That's where he meets everybody from those family members from his ofrenda. And because he stole the guitar, he has been cursed. The only way he can go back is by receiving a blessing from a member of his family before sunrise, or else he's going to be stuck in the land of the dead forever. Initially, Mama Imelda very happily gives him a blessing as long as he abandons music. He refuses, and he says, well, Ernesto de la Cruz is my great-great-grandfather. I'm going to go find him. I'm going to go get his blessing instead. I will say the one thing that I don't know if I thought of the first time I saw this, but afterwards, and I mentioned something about this earlier, like this movie feels like kind of the last classic Pixar movie because you have, as we're about to learn, we have the mismatched buddy comedy because Miguel encounters this guy named Hector, voiced by Gael Garcia Bernal, who is also, I should note, excellent in this movie. He is a lot of fun. And once the movie calls for him to be much more emotional, he's very effective. But initially, Hector is just this seemingly hardscrabble skeleton who nobody seems to remember. Nobody from his family remembers him, and he is worried he is going to vanish entirely, fading from existence, a la Marty McFly in Back to the Future. And you've got that. And most importantly, you've got the what if the human world, but in a different context. Like once he gets to the land of the dead, there's it's the bureaucratic side of things, which Pixar loves to do in a lot of its films, which I'd forgotten about. But anyway, so he encounters Hector. Hector believes that he can help Miguel. They don't realize they're possibly related. Spoiler alert for a 9-year-old film. But Hector believes that if Miguel goes back home, Hector can give Miguel his photo. He can get put on his ofrenda. He will be remembered. He'll be fine. So that's why the two of them decide to pair up, go on this journey, because Hector also says he knows Ernesto de la Cruz, which he does, even though we don't know the full context of how he does at this point. And around this time, we get to see what it's like when a skeleton fades from existence, because as they're going through trying to figure out where they can find Ernesto, they come across a skeleton voiced very briefly by Edward James Olmos. Chicharron is the character he plays. And I know that Edward James Olmos has had an amazing career. I will always think of him as Colonel Adama from Battlestar Galactica. So say we all. It's a very slight part in the film, mostly a very sad part, although there is one bit of levity in the song that Hector sings to Chicharron. Everyone knows Juanita and how he changes one specific word in the lyrics to make sure that he is being appropriate for a child. I like Gael Garcia Bernal's performance of this song, and it definitely has a very mournful quality to it. But again, it's also a very brief number. And I think it also speaks to, I put this in my notes, the reason why I think this is not a musical is because this movie goes out of its way, as I feel like a lot of modern musicals do, to clarify why the characters are singing in that moment. Every time we see a song, or hear a song in this movie, it's not just this character's feelings are so big that they must burst into song. It's, well, this is why this is, like, it has to have a reason. So it's a good song. I think it's slight but effective. What do the two of you think?
I mean, I think that the movie, I think, gets infinitely, it hits its stride when they get to the land of the dead. And I do love not just the color changes. I'm one of those weirdos that is fascinated by how film portrays death and the afterlife, and kind of shows us possibilities. This has a very kind of Beetlejuice-esque in this fact that, like, there's bureaucracy and civil servants and TSA, and all these things. But yeah, I think when the movie doesn't get talked enough about with how it portrays class, I think, because yeah, when they go to visit this friend, it's clear that there is this sense of people that aren't remembered are essentially the poor people that are living in poverty. There's a slum that he kind of ends up taking Miguel to. I think the song is beautiful, and I think it gives kind of it starts to slowly unwind Hector's character. You learn that he's clearly got some musician chops. If you don't already know where the plot is going with his character, I think this is a good kind of way to do it. And I think the movie, it shows a good opportunity of emphasizing kind of the local side, where he's got the song about Juanita that's clearly like a song that like friends are kind of throwing around to each other. It gives that kind of sense of like groups of people like hanging around a campfire singing songs. It gives this real community feel that you feel is different when they go to like the plaza or something where clearly people are more affluent. This movie showing that there are people that are struggling even in the afterlife, and it comes through this loss of remembrance.
Yeah, it's interesting what you're referring to, Josh, about the idea of how and why people sing. I think of this as sort of, it's a diegetic musical.
Sure. Yes.
It's one in which it's about people actually performing music at the time, and so it has that gives it a sort of a unique quality. But again, that really does truncate. And this is, it's a fun little bit. It is nice. It has that sort of like, what the sailors in a bar would be singing to each other, kind of, this vaguely naughty, sort of like the Lydia the Tattooed Lady. It's, that's sort of the vibe I get from it. Just as a brief aside, I do have some questions about some Cars-like questions about the logistics of this world. Did this afterlife not exist until the creation of photography? Because it's a really important thing in this afterlife that you have, and how much of the photo has to be gone? Because his body is there on the altar. Is it, how much of his head is gone? If there's some questions that I have about how this thing is going to work.
And why can't they go to the bathroom? No, those are fair questions that I've honestly never thought of myself, but I see your point. So after everyone knows Juanita, Hector and Miguel go forward, and Miguel is able to live out his dream kind of, because he is able to perform in a talent competition in the Land of the Dead. Because I should note that outside of the ticking clock regarding Miguel getting back home before sunrise, there is also the Sunrise Spectacular show that Ernesto de la Cruz performs every year. Every Day of the Dead is kind of the closing of that Day of the Dead. I guess, Scott, similar question. What did they do before he died in the Day of the Dead to commemorate things? But after the song, the big number that the two of them end up singing together, that Hector and Miguel sing, is Un Poco Loco, which is, I would say there are three really good to great songs in this film. One of them is obviously Remember Me. This is one of the other ones. I really liked this a lot. It's, what I put in my notes is this is maybe the most fun musical number in the film. It's almost as if these kinds of songs are enjoyable to watch. Pixar, it's okay to make a big show-stopping number, because this is about as close as you get to a showstopper of sorts. It's a big, bouncy song. The idea is that it's clearly getting the audience really excited. Miguel is not able to enjoy too much of the adulation because his family is making their way to locate him, and they have to escape before he can enjoy the praise too much. But I like this song a lot. I think this is a lot of fun, and it shows you what Pixar could do if they really allowed themselves to make a non-diegetic musical. What do the two of you think of this one?
I love this song. I think it's boppy. It's the way that Miguel sings it, there's so much enthusiasm for it. You get why he loves the song entirely. I also love that it's that great kind of movie trope of like, he thinks he's going to sing a specific song, but then somebody else sings it, and he's got to try to like kind of find a way to stand out. It's so peppy. And I think after the previous song, you kind of need that extreme, like, high energy, that the song has.
I think there is a uniquely hard kind of song to write for movies. And that is one where within the context of the movie, the song is supposed to be great. It's basically that thing you do problem. It's can you write a song that convincingly everyone is just fired up about it within the world of the movie? Because if it doesn't work, everything falls apart. And this is that, because it has to be the song that would get the audience happy, enough to potentially win. Now, obviously, he actually doesn't win because of the things that happen with him. But that's a hard kind of song to write. And it's like, all right, I believe that people would get, enthusiastic enough about this to think that this was a potentially, winning situation, which is that the context of what's going on within the movie, which is the rest of the family members engaging in their search for Miguel. And it's sort of, it breaks up in a way that it's like, I just give me a little bit more of the song. I'm enjoying it. I'm having fun with it. And then we're, have to get a bunch of other stuff that's going off in the background. But it is a good example of that kind of, it's the, can you write a song that's a hit within the context of this movie?
Yeah. Well, and arguably it's one of two songs that falls into that camp.
Sure.
Because I think the big song is the one that really, like, boy, if that song didn't work, and in different contexts than we hear it when Ernesto de la Cruz sings it. But anyway, so Miguel and Hector, they escape the clutches of the family, and Miguel is able to get into Ernesto de la Cruz's mansion before his big performance. And before we can get the big twist, there is a brief, like a 50 seconds, according to the track listing, song, The World Es Mi Familia. It's another of de la Cruz's songs that Miguel sings in front of this whole audience of people to basically say, look at me, I must be your great-great-grandson. I think it's mostly enjoyable for the fact that Anthony Gonzalez is a lot of fun. I think it's super brief. It is, as Scott, you point out, it is cut short by events within the story. Anything the two of you would want to add to this song?
Again, I think the songs directly connected to De La Cruz tend to be the weakest, even though he's not directly singing it. I think the attempts to kind of get his attention, it's a song that I often forget is kind of there. Again, because it's not even a minute. It's like the equivalent of a TikTok song at this point. But I mean, again, it's cute, but it does not have the impact of, and I think that that's ultimately, if there is a criticism that can be made about Coco, it's that this being kind of a first attempt at a Pixar musical, you can kind of see them trying to figure out how to do that. And I'm wondering if this is kind of a reason why they haven't really returned to that. It's worth pointing out that a lot of Pixar trailers since have kind of used like one song, to kind of sell a premise. Hoppers and the Sierra song, I think, is a great example. So I do wonder how much kind of trying to find ways to introduce music ended up being more of a pain in the ass for them than it ultimately was worth. Because yeah, I do feel like there's when people think about the songs from this movie, they're kind of surprised at how many there are, because I think only a small handful of them are what actually stick. Ironically, in the movie about remembrance, only a few are what to remember.
I don't have much to add to that. I mean, it's bouncy while it's going on, and then it's done, and I probably shouldn't talk any longer than the song lasts.
Fair enough. So after that, we get a lot of the twists are untwisted. We learn that Hector does know Ernesto de la Cruz because the two of them were kind of a musical duo. They were a musical act. Hector wrote the songs, Ernesto performed them, and perhaps was maybe a little bit more appealing to the audience, but Hector was the creative juice. And then Ernesto was very angry when Hector realized he was homesick. He missed his wife. He missed his daughter. He wanted to go back home. Ernesto pretended to be all good with it, but actually poisoned Hector, who had always thought he had died through food poisoning. It turned out that he died via some poison through a drink that he had as kind of a goodbye drink. And Ernesto wants to continue to have his fame, his long after life fame. He tosses Miguel and Hector in a pit where the two of them realize that, Hector's daughter, her name was Coco. His wife's name was Imelda. Miguel was wrong the whole time. Hector is his great-great-grandfather. And around this time, we also hear the second iteration of Remember Me, performed by Gael Garcia Bernal, as a lullaby that Hector sings to Coco before he has to go off to another series of performances. A couple of things. First of all, I'm built different. If I killed somebody, I wouldn't put the exact way in which I killed that person into a movie I made, because that might give away my whole game. That's what Ernesto does. That's how Miguel and Hector realize it, because it's like down to what he says to Hector is in this movie that he makes.
I'm gonna push back on that, because here's what I think. It's another example that proves that there is no creative bone in Ernesto's body. All he has
true.
is stuff he's stolen from Hector's life.
I appreciate your use of the word bone, considering he's a skeleton at this point. I do think this is a very sweet rendition of Remember Me, and it instantly upends what we think of when we think of that song, because it is now suddenly a lot more poignant, a lot sadder, especially since the way that it ends is with Hector kind of stepping away and having to force himself to back away from his very young daughter. I think it's not the obviously emotionally devastating moment. There's another one that's coming up very soon, but I did like this version a lot. What do the two of you think? Anything additionally you'd want to add about this specific version of Remember Me?
I think it really shows kind of the way, this is a really great movie, I think, if you're a lyricist and want to learn about songwriting and how intent of who you're singing to can change the entire tone. This is a song that when we first see it is a love song that's performed for a paramour, and yet it transitions into this song that is a lullaby from a father to a daughter. And I think that changes the entire dynamic of the lyrics. You're watching everything now from that point being like, oh, okay, when you're hearing Ernesto singing in the beginning, and he's talking about remember me, though I have to say goodbye, you're kind of like, is this a guy that's a Lothario that's just kind of like hit it and quit it, and that's all it is? Whereas when you hear Hector's original version, it's the story of a man who is, torn between wanting to follow his career and a dream, but also wanting to be a father for his kid and help raise her. So I think it's a really great example of lyrical intention that I really still think is very smart in how they execute it.
I really can't top that. It really does. It creates such a pivot moment for the narrative, and it really identifies what's potentially going to be great and important about this song throughout the rest of the film. And it's got juice. And honestly, probably until this viewing, that version was my favorite version. That's the one that it's like, because I had the reaction to that. It's like, oh wow, that's something that really makes it clear again how little understanding Ernesto has of art, basically. That he just saw something, grabbed it, and threw it out there in the only way he knew how, which is to be kind of a preening cad.
Yes. So Miguel and Hector kind of reunite again, realizing who they really are. They are rescued by the family from this pit. Everybody kind of realizes what's actually going on. They go forward to stop Ernesto, to expose his crime to the audience at the Sunrise Spectacular. And after that, it turns out that unfortunately in all the melee, the photograph of Hector is lost. Or it seems to be lost at the moment. Hector is fading away. Imelda and Hector give an unconditional blessing to Miguel, who goes back into the land of the living and immediately races back home so that he can talk to Mama Coco, who is now very, very old. We've already seen has a very, very slim memory of any part of her life, especially from her youth. And Miguel pulls out a guitar, much to the shock and horror of the rest of the family, and begins singing Remember Me. It's not quite the lullaby version, but it's awfully close to that. Miguel is very emotional as this is happening, and all the more so when his Mama Coco, midway through the song, begins singing with him, thus ensuring that she does still have a memory of her father, Hector. As we learn, she actually kept the torn portion of the photograph in her drawer in secret, and that ensures that Hector is able to be remembered on the ofrenda. It basically wraps up the movie. But again, this is it is almost it almost feels like a parody of how Pixar would try to make people cry. Like the way that this scene is deployed is extremely effective. It's like weaponized emotion in a way. Pixar is really good at this. And even now, I still think next to, Joy having to say goodbye to Bing Bong at the end of Inside Out, it's probably the most emotional I've been at a Pixar film in the last 15 years, because it's just, as I said, Scott, earlier, you'd have to be made of stone not to get emotional at this scene. I almost want you to explain yourself first.
I shall, and I will tell you that I think the part that really hit home this time, and like a lot of things, you can feel dumb about not really having grasped certain components until you've seen something of subsequent times. And this is just sort of felt like, oh wow, everyone's suddenly magically okay with the singing, and even, I mean, that was a little bit of it. I'm not saying that was the most of it. I do love the performance because there's an urgency in the way he's singing it, because the remember me is like, you have to do this now. You have to remember him now. Time is of the essence. And so you can sort of feel that in the performance of the song. But I think what it's really getting at, and I think this is part of what connects, and I was, kind of joking earlier about the whole idea of when photography was invented, is that there's a real component to understanding about how art connects to memory and family. And you have the art and what is good and what is bad, and that this was what pulled them together. It was a recognition that this song was part of what allowed this family to remember one another, that photography, that pictures are allow them to remember one another. So when I started hearing all this, I'm like, oh damn, that's the part that didn't really hit together, is this moment is not just I'm making you cry because Mama Coco is there and I need this to happen. We're unifying in a way that's allowing the family to see they don't have to be separate. They are part of the picture of how you remember and how you honor your family.
Yeah, I would agree. Kristen, anything you'd want to add to this specific rendition of Remember Me?
Yeah, I mean, it's the moment I think everything comes together, and, if you want to point to a moment that got them the Oscar, I think it's that.
Yeah.
And I think going back to, exactly what you were saying, Josh, about, the emotional kind of manipulation of Pixar sequences, I never felt necessarily emotionally manipulated until I saw Toy Story 5. And Toy Story 5 has one sequence, and most people will know what it is, where I was just kind of like, you, okay? I know exactly what's happening here, and you're not getting it from me. But I think here, especially because I wonder too how much social media plays into things. I think everybody's got the algorithm attuned to like something that makes them emotional, whether that's like dogs that, thrive after trauma, or, we've seen a lot of videos of, parents with dementia who find through music that they're able to remember for a second their former lives. And so I think in this movie, and it's again, I think one of the things that I always find fascinating about movies that look at death and the afterlife is that the connection that Miguel and Coco by extension have to the dead through the performance of the song and the memories that it evokes. It's a damn perfect scene. It is utterly amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree. So as mentioned, after this song is over, everything kind of gets wrapped up very quickly. And the final song, once we see that the family is now fine with music and with making shoes, they can do both. We see Miguel in kind of full mariachi regalia as he sings the final song, Proud Corazon. I like this song a lot. I have always really liked this song. It does help that I was realizing, I'm talking about memory, my older son who saw this movie in theaters back in 2017 when he was 3, there was a time when he listened to this song a lot. More than he should have, perhaps. But the point being, this is the only other song that I kind of knew off the top of my head from this movie. I think it's a really good blend of exuberance and wistfulness. There is some sadness to it. The fact that by the time this song plays, Coco has passed away. She is now with her parents in the land of the dead. And I think it really puts things together very nicely in a bow. I like this one a lot. Any thoughts from the two of you on Proud Corazon?
This song's become a favorite of mine through just kind of rewatching this through the countless times they've shown it on Freeform, and I always get wrapped up in the movie again. Because I think and I think this is something that could not have been foreseen when this movie came out. I think it's only gotten stronger since, is that it's a song about pride for your family, pride for your heritage, and wanting to share that with others. And I think that the last time I watched this movie, which was a couple weeks ago, and watching it in the times that we're living in, it's one of those where it's like, oh yeah, Miguel is proud of his family. He's proud of who he is. And I feel like it's a song that we need more people singing today in the face of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, not a ton to add except that, it's the one that I would listen to on its own outside of the context of watching the movie, because it's just a really good song, and really, it's a great note to end it on, because you obviously have this very mournful, very emotional moment, and so to go out on on the big high of the song is really, it gives it that energy out the door that the finale number needs, basically.
After this, there is naturally the fourth and final iteration of Remember Me, and it is the end credits version. It's the duet, this one between the singers Miguel and Natalia Lafourcade. I'm probably mispronouncing her name. I apologize. It's honestly, I think it's one of the better end credits versions of a song. It's certainly not the best version of this song. It's probably, if I was ranking the four versions of the song we hear in the film, it's probably third out of fourth. But I would also put a big, a chasm between this version and the version that Benjamin Bratt sings. No offense to Detective Ray Curtis at the New York Police Department. But I do think that this one's fun. It is, I almost feel bad for the two performers, because it's like, okay, everybody just cried their eyes out at this other version. Good luck. Have fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the problem. It's like, it's good, but it's just basically reminding us, like, oh, this is more like, I mean, it's not fair to actually compare it directly to the Ernesto de la Cruz version, but it's like, oh, this is a version that someone sings to be put on a record. And that's like, it's just kind of, it's inevitably going to fall flat in that context, even though they're the ones who performed it at the Oscars.
Of course they are. I don't think I knew that.
It's definitely the song that sounds like it would air a lot on Disney radio. I mean, I think that's the thing. I think that what's interesting to me is that a couple years later, when Encanto comes out and Sebastian Yatra does Dos Orbitas, it sounds similar. Like, it's the similar, I think him and Miguel have a similar vocal pattern that makes the song sound kind of like they're kissing cousins. So I like this one. It's boppy, but again, it feels very much like Disney radio. But like you were saying, it's one of the better end credit songs, I think, in a minute.
It is, but it sounds like Disney radio is a very sick burn, so kudos to you. Now, the movie died very quickly before we wrap up. I do want to call out the movie unsurprisingly won the Best Animated Feature Oscar in 2017 at the Oscars over The Boss Baby, The Breadwinner, Ferdinand, and Loving Vincent. I think two of those are pretty good movies, The Breadwinner and Loving Vincent, but Coco definitely the obvious winner there. And it did win for Best Original Song. You mentioned Diane Warren before, Kristen. She did have a song nominated that year, Stand Up for Something from Marshall. Didn't win. There's only one other nominee that I think could have actually gotten there. Yeah. Yes, there are other nominees from Mudbound, Mighty River, and Mystery of Love from Call Me By Your Name. But the other big one, I'd forgotten this was the year of This Is Me from The Greatest Showman. Speaking of other Broadway songwriters, it's a big song. I Remember Me should have won. I'm glad it did. But that could have done it. What I had not realized until today, this song was nominated but lost at the Grammys in 2019 in the Best Song Written for Visual Media category. The other nominees were This Is Me, Mystery of Love, and All the Stars from Black Panther. And the winner was Shallow from A Star Is Born, which I can kind of see that winning over Remember Me. It's a pretty great song.
They did tell us maybe it's time to let the old ways die. So
there you go. So, I mean, I like this movie. I enjoy the songs. I will just share here, but kind of my wrap up in terms of this movie is my very last note. I don't want a sequel. I'm getting one apparently, but I really don't want a sequel to Coco. I don't know how they're going to do it because the actor who played Miguel is going to be 25 in 2029 when this movie is apparently going to be re-released. I'll acknowledge Lee Unkrich and Adrian Molina are set to return in the same roles they had for this one, but I neither need nor want a sequel to Coco.
I would do you one better and say I also don't want a ride.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I'd be okay with a ride.
I think that it's one of those where the world is just so immersive, and I know, like, Pandora at Disney World has shown us that they can do that, but that's a world. Like, that's a land. This is a ride. I just don't know if you can boil that down into one Pirates of the Caribbean-esque ride.
Fair.
I'm concerned, but it's going to be another few years, and there's a lot of time to figure out what's going to happen.
Who knows if we'll be here as a country in 2029? So.
Well, I think with that, unless anybody else to say, why don't we wrap then on Coco? So Scott, why don't you take us out?
So with that, it's time to turn down the volume on Mousterpiece Melodies. What's on the playlist for our next episode? From 1998, Mulan. And while you wait, make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts. Kristen Lopez, thank you so much for joining us. I know we mentioned some of your credits at the top of the show, but can you let listeners know where they can find you online?
Yeah, I'm on all social media at Kristen K. Lopez, except Instagram, where I am at Kristen Lopez 88. I do my own podcast called Ticklish Business, all about old Hollywood. You can find that wherever you get your podcasts. And I write all over the internet, but I'm predominantly trying to run my own newsletter. It's called The Film Maven. You can read and subscribe to that at thefilmmaven.com. We do a lot of really cool stuff for paid subscribers, including mixers and all sorts of fun stuff. So consider throwing some coin at me.
All right. And of course, we'd love for all of you to listen along. Tell us what you think. Do you love the songs of Coco? Do you like them? Are you like Toy Story 5 co-star Conan O'Brien? And were you mad that something else came along to be called Coco after he did his whole Team Coco thing in the early 2010s? I remember when he got fake mad at this movie. It was funny. And maybe one day I'll find out if he's funny as a potty training toy in Toy Story 5. Anyway, if you have any comments, questions, or opinions you'd like to share, you can always reach me at masterpiececinema@gmail.com. Follow me on Blue Sky at Masterpiece. And Scott, where can our listeners find you online?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Scott Renshaw, as well as on Letterboxd at Scott Renshaw, and my primary outlet, Salt Lake City Weekly, cityweekly.net. I'm Scott Renshaw.
And I'm Josh Spiegel, and we'll see you all next time on Mousterpiece Melodies.